Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Prayer and Testimony. My name is Joe, and I'm here with,
Ohimai.
and today we're going to talk about ministry. So, Ohimai, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, first of all, Joe, thank you for having me. It's been a blessing to just be a part of this. Honestly, ministry to me is a calling, at least to me personally. It's the way that I express sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, whether that's in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, whether that's through music, through conversation, through prayer. Ministry is my way on sharing the love of Jesus Christ to others.
Okay, thank you. So, I was going to ask how would you define ministry, but I feel like you kind of touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, how has ministry impacted your relationship with God and others?
Well, I'll answer how it's affected in my relationship with others. First, the first experience I've had with ministry is being ministered to, and I think that first happened for me, when I was in the space of really not being fully cognizant or aware of how I personally can be involved in ministry. I'll never forget it. I believe I was in high school, probably my freshman year, so this was 2013, around that time, I think. I had just gotten involved in literature evangelism. I mean, for those who don't know, what that is, it pretty much is selling, really on a donation basis, literature, spiritual based, of course, biblical based literature. And the way we would do it in my institution is that we would have it offset our tuition. So it's how we got through school.
Yeah.
It's how we were also, ministering to other people, whether or not they needed prayer, whether or not they, wanted Bible studies as well. We offered that too. But it was really just a way to get into the community and, receive a financial benefit too, because we were in need of that. Yeah. So honestly, one of my first summers, I'll never forget it, because the first time that I was by myself, away from the home for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. And I remember going out to the field, having what I thought at that time was, full awareness of sales and, just being out there talking to people. I don't know what I was doing. One of the first experiences that really stuck with me, especially, at that young age, was the provision of God. When I say the provision, I am a strong believer that God prepares the way before he sends somebody on that path. And for me personally, it was a matter of not just looking for a specific tailored blessing according to what I was in need of, monetarily but really just finding my purpose within what I thought was just a job, but was really just the first step in a calling on my life, Wow. And that first summer, I'll never forget it. I was terrible, never really had been in sales to that extent, in my life before that time. And this one person, I'll never forget it. This one person, he looked at me and he said, I think I see more than what you're doing right now. I see more about you. I feel a presence, surrounding you. And I really feel led to bless you, but not just because I have money, but because I see God calling you to something greater. Oh. And for me, it was just something that I wasn't expecting to hear. I just, hear the books, I have, I'm saying, message of hope or,
Yes, that's the Christ.
But at the end of the day, it was that person being personal with me in a space where I was still learning how to be personal through ministry. And that really touched me, not because he had the funds to donate, not because he cared about my education, but because he saw more than what I saw in myself at that time. And I think that's how God looks at us. He sees the things that we're involved in, and he sees what we ask for. I've created you for a greater purpose. I'll bless you in this, but it's for something that you're going to be prepared for down the road. So one of the first steps that made ministry so clear to me was seeing the provision in the midst of the involvement, if that makes sense, So lesson that I continue to learn along the way. So
that's true. I think oftentimes we sell ourselves short, and God has, like you said, just something way bigger planned that we can even imagine. It's like
we can't imagine.
We can't imagine. It's like we're just focused on what we can see in front of us. But God is like,
present benefit.
God is like, I want to take you to a completely different place. So my next question would be, how has being a leader in ministry changed you as a person? So not just being in the ministry, but being at the forefront.
Right. It's interesting, the word you use, forefront. I don't really like that word.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Only in pertaining to myself, because I believe that in order to be an effective leader, you must first serve. I believe in servant leadership. So anytime that I'm in a space where I'm called to lead or I'm called to, gather or connect, I believe in service. I believe in leadership by example, and ministry has helped me in that aspect because you cannot be involved in ministry without serving. You
That's
know,
very true.
from the moment Jesus came to earth and he was active in his ministry, of the good news of the gospel, he did it in a way that his disciples, those around him, those who he was ministering to, could not fathom or understand because it was coming from a perspective of serving you.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, where you come from,
Mhm.
you are loved and you deserve to be served. So when I think of how it's prepared me, service is needed in times of comfort and discomfort. I believe that those situations, those environments where, you might feel vulnerable, you might be, you might feel uncomfortable, because of what you're not used to. But those people can benefit, those environments, those communities can benefit from you just serving them in a way that meets them where they are instead of what you're used to coming from, So ministry itself has prepared me for leadership just from the mindset of being in a place where I'm willing even to just serve people and what they need. And through that facet, whether it's food, whether it's, clothes in cold weather, or whether,
Bro.
whatever it is, I could then show them the love of Christ by first approaching their need, meeting them where they are, and then sharing them how it affected me and helped me in my life. So I'll say the biggest thing for me and how ministry has helped my leadership is serving.
That's a great point because you can always tell the difference between leaders when people, I guess I should say, are only at the forefront as opposed to those who are, they're in the back, they're working with everybody else, they're tired with everybody else, but they still have that spirit of comfort and joy and saying, we're doing this work for the Lord. You guys, you still got this. You still got to push through. So yeah, I think that's a very good point that you made.
Yeah.
So what has been your biggest challenge in leadership or in ministry or both alike?
Oof.
Giving you flashbacks.
Yeah, there's a couple I can talk on, but I'll say this one first and foremost. I would say, outside noise. And what I mean by that is perspectives and opinions that really honestly don't matter. And the reason why it's affected me so much, I would say, is because oftentimes in these spaces, we look for the validation of others. We like the good feeling it gives us. Some people, I even heard somebody say this a moment ago, and it sounded crazy to me when I first heard it. We can be even selfish in our serving, in our giving. If you think about it, when you give, when you serve somebody, it makes you feel great. It makes you feel good. And oftentimes it can lead to almost a self-gratifying feeling from the control and the power that you feel you are supplying somebody in need. What we forget is that somebody gave that to us too,
Yeah.
And when I say outside noise, it's a lot of things. It can be that. It can be people's perspective on how they think you should be leading.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a big one, especially in our church.
You need to be doing this, you need to be that. But
But it's also accurate sometimes. And a lot of times it's in your approach. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And for me, that outside noise, it tends to be deafening to the gift giver. And when I say that, sometimes God could be calling you to a specific task and a specific assignment, but because you're focusing on how this is gonna, how you're gonna be viewed from somebody else, you lose direction. You don't hear the voice. And for me personally, when I first started out, you hear the praise. That's also, I'm putting that in outside noise too.
Okay.
Really, because praise can be distracting.
That's true.
As well.
Oh my goodness, you did so good. I was so blessed. And
it could be distracting. When people focus on the gift and not the gift giver. So for me, all of those things that one, it didn't call me, it didn't prepare me, it's not going to sustain me. So the only facet of it that matters is being willing to serve despite the things that I hear that discourage me. And a lot of times it's not coming from malicious intent. It's coming from a place of a lack of understanding. But you can still love somebody through that. You can still serve somebody through that. You don't have to understand somebody on every level to show them the love of Christ. So for me, the outside noise was very distracting because, a recovering people pleaser, you tend to focus on those things that make you feel a certain type of way, that can motivate your behavior, that can influence your actions. And a lot of times you lose sight on the purpose and why you're doing that thing. So that's been one of the biggest challenges for me because we live in a world where everything is monitored. Every little
That's
thing is
true.
monitored. Everything
Especially
that you
now.
say, everything that you write, you know what I'm saying? It's recorded, you know?
It is.
So yeah, you gotta be
Especially in this
careful.
day and age.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, outside noise. Yeah, just,
Yeah.
you know, lock in. Or if you think of like athletes, you know, right before they're about to start, they gotta make sure that everything, oh, it's starting to rain.
It is, yes. I don't want your
We might have to cut
camera
this
to get...
short. Alrighty, so we're back. We had to do a slight location
Mm-hmm.
change because we didn't want the camera to get wet. Can't remember what we were talking about. It was getting good.
It was. I believe one of the last things were, you know, just the struggles that come along with
Yeah, the noise.
being a leader
the
in
noise.
ministry. Yes. Blocking the outside noise, girl.
Yeah. Oh, I think I was saying like it's like an athlete, like a track person. You know, right before you start, you gotta lock in, block out. You know, the crowd cheering you on, like, oh, you got it, you got it.
Yeah.
You gotta focus on where you're going.
Mm-hmm. But you know what's interesting about that? If I may pause you.
Go ahead.
You know, just using that same analogy, when it comes to a professional athlete, oftentimes on the biggest stages is where the noise is the loudest. That can either be positive or it can be negative. At the end of the day, though, every professional athlete has a coach. If you're a pro, at least, you have a coach.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
and out of all the outside noise, people cheering you on, go, or you know, you're doing terrible. You know, whatever it is, you have to hear and distinctly hear your coach's voice and what he's telling you. He has the big picture, the outside view, the perspective. How does this apply in ministry? When you're in the field, you hear noise. When you're on stage, you hear it. When you get off the stage, you hear even more noise, you know? But we have to really get to a point where we disconnect from that, not from the willingness and the heart to serve, but from the effect and the influence the outside noise has us, so we can listen to the one voice that is pulling us through the entire time. And I think that's huge for ministry, because to have the heart of Jesus is not just to be a servant, but to be in tune with the Father. It's a two-way street, you know? Every time Jesus, you know, stepped away or got flustered, or every time something big happened, he stepped away and he spent one-on-one time with the Father. He was in one spirit, in tune with the Father. And I think that's what we all need to do.
That's a great point that you made. You got to focus on the one voice, and you also have to recognize your coach's voice.
Yes.
And I remember when I was in school and I did sports, and you know, you're like I said, you're on the field, but you got to know your coach's voice. You know, you hear your friend shouting, or your mom, or your dad, or your brother, whatever, shouting. But then you hear your coach's voice, like, go left, go left.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, I gotta.
It has to be, you know? Even your mama's voice.
Yeah,
Look, everybody can call your name, but when your mother calls your name, you know who that woman is. Yeah, so, you know, it's very important.
So what do you think or how long have you been in ministry, I should ask?
In what facet?
As a leader in ministry.
Okay, as a leader, I would say about 5 to 7 years, not just music related.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good amount of time.
A little bit, yeah.
So in your 5 to 7 years, what has been your biggest takeaway from this experience, this journey, you know?
I would say one of the most gratifying things, and mind you, this might even come across a little selfish, but one of the most gratifying things is really having a front row seat and viewpoint of the present growth that you are being a part of cultivating. You know, and also that's been one of the biggest rewards, despite, you know, the stress, despite dealing with, you know, some of the things that happen just within ministry. You know, there's a saying that I got from a pastor, and really, you know, salvation is free, but ministry costs money. So anything that involves money, there are going to be problems, you know, more money, you know, so at the end of the day, you know, one of the biggest takeaways is really seeing the present growth and how you are cultivating not just those you're leading, but also yourself in being a leader, you know. It's just amazing to see people change, to see people understand things, and to now be influenced by that and to go teach somebody else. I think that's a lot of times what gets left out. You know, we like to learn, we like to consume. We are a society that loves consuming. How much do we give back, though? How much do we share and teach others to get to the same point that we ourselves weren't always at? You know, that's big for me.
And I think that's really important what you said about giving back, and also training somebody up to come behind you. Because, you know, sometimes we have this great ministry, it's helping all these people, and then it dies. Why? Because there's no one to pass the baton. We're too busy holding the baton ourselves that we're not preparing the way for the next generation to continue this ministry, continue this blessing. And
you have to know when to let go.
Yeah, you gotta
You gotta
know when
know.
to let go.
You know, we can't really receive what God has for us if our hands are full.
But-
You gotta let go of what you're holding on to so you can receive something greater. You know, sometimes it takes us a little bit to understand that
That's
because
true.
we're comfortable.
Say it again.
I'm talking to myself. Yeah, you know, that's definitely one of the biggest takeaways. I would say definitely, of course, the personal spiritual growth, you know, and realizing that, yes, you're on a stage 24/7, but really, you know, you're not getting validation from everybody. You're getting validation from one person. And the one person that you're getting validation from already gave you his validation when he called you. When he calls you, he prepares you. You know, before he prepares you, your purpose is literally waiting. You know, it's waiting for you to walk into it confidently.
That's confidently.
Confidently.
Yeah,
You know,
that's that hard part.
as confident as
Confidence.
he asked us to flee, it's that confident for us to step into that next thing. You know, and for me, that personal growth didn't happen for me until I was already in leadership. People might say, one might say, "Oh, it's too late." You know, you have to know these things. You have to be at this level before you can lead others. I believe everybody in leadership is learning. I believe those who learn best also learn through teaching. If you can teach it, if you can demonstrate it,
Yeah, that's
that really
how you
shows.
know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. So I've learned that along the way. I did not have that coming into leadership at all, but it's also been, like I said, that growth aspect, and it's been rewarding and beneficial to look at myself and see where I was, see where I am, and where I can be.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who's, you know, trying to do a ministry or someone asking to lead a ministry? What advice would you give to them?
I would say commit your plan to the Lord first. Oftentimes, I think, you know, we think backwards and we think of the end goal before the steps to the first step. You know, I believe in SMART goals, of course, and I believe that we can set things up, we can have plans. There's a verse that says, "Man makes plans, but God orders your steps." We could all imagine, we could all dream. I believe God wants us to have visions, but if you're not committing that plan to the Lord, ultimately, it's for your own personal benefit because you're excluding the person who gives you the power to be sustained through that. Now, one might take that and say, "Oh, well, are you saying that you can never be successful without God?" Well, with God, all things are possible. So although that's not what I'm saying, what I am saying is that when you include him in the process at the beginning, he will sustain you through it to the end. And for that person out there, whoever they are, that is trying to start a ministry or maybe a business, a nonprofit, a company, whatever that may be, commit your plan to the Lord first. You know, I strongly believe that if your intentions are right, if they're coming from a godly perspective, or just, you know, trying to serve others or just do better, put some positivity into the world, God will not only give you the provision to be successful, but I believe that he orders our steps in a way that are tailored to the gifts he gives us. Because everybody has spiritual gifts, but not everybody can access those spiritual gifts without connecting to the Father. We're all made in God's image, but we're not all children of God. And although, again, it might be a crazy statement, well, how can you say? Well, you see, it's a choice.
Okay.
It's a choice. So because we all have that access, tapping into that consistently, again, connecting with the Father,
Connecting with the
is
Father.
how we can be successful, how we can be prosperous. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Will we experience pushback, setbacks? Absolutely, yes. But we will be sustained to the end. And that's a promise that he gives us in his word.
That's true. And to go back to like the coach and the athlete perspective, like a coach can always see something in you that you might not be able to see yourself. But if you try to make it to the Olympics without a coach, you're not going
You're
anywhere.
not going nowhere.
You're not going anywhere. You might be
You know?
good at high school, maybe college, but you know, you need that coach to fine tune your skills, to bring different sides of you, different aspects of your body out that you didn't realize that you had the capability to do. So I think that's
Definitely.
a really good point. So I know we're wrapping up now, but what would be your favorite and then least favorite thing about ministry?
Well, you know, I'm gonna start with the veggies. My least favorite.
Oh wait,
although I
what?
love my
You said
vegetables.
veggie.
You know, just, you know.
So how is that the least favorite?
Well, you know, some people don't. You know,
Okay.
but I'll say for me, least favorite would be. And I just saw, you know, on a video somebody said this, but a lot of times, I think that confidence in using your gift at a certain level can be distracting to others. It's one of my least favorite things is seeing how people misperceive you being confident in your gift. It's a very thin line.
Yeah.
I believe that different audiences call for different things. But one thing is sure, if you're not walking in that thing confidently, how can you expect somebody to be receptive of the message you're trying to
That's
portray,
true.
right? Oftentimes, people who are very gifted, people who even are anointed, I think that sometimes they themselves get misunderstood, and sometimes the message can get misperceived because people tend to focus on the bells and whistles. People tend to focus on the flashy lights, on the the gravitas, the extra stuff that really isn't the sustenance, the message. And although I might be, I might have experience and be, adequately able to do this in this aspect, at the end of the day, really getting down to the core of what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying to do, whether it's that's in service through ministry or through leadership, is the most important thing. And one of the things that just it aggravates me a lot, because this is also something that could feed into, your own personal accolades and self praise. I hate that, but when you go through that, just constantly being criticized, being monitored, you tend to think about it a lot. Sometimes it influences you. What I hate the most is when it influences other people and they lose sight of what's important. It's a big thing. I think that it works hand in hand. It definitely goes both ways, but you have to really be intentional about not letting it affect you. Because once it affects you, it changes now your behavior and how, you are involved in that ministry that you lead or that you're just a part of. So I really am a strong believer that methods matter. Being equipped and being knowledgeable of your craft and of the nuances in your gift and how to reach certain people matters. Jesus didn't have the same approach to the woman of the well, that he had to Peter when he was calling him to be his disciple. Some things require different tactics, and I believe that wisdom, that knowledge also is spiritual, but you have to be cognizant on how it can be useful in the present. One of my favorite things would have to be seeing somebody else become changed in the same way that you did. I mean, I guess the best way I can explain it is putting it into terms of like school. For me myself, I don't want to profess any lack or anything negative. But math ain't my strong suit. I'll say that.
Math? I like math. I like easy math.
I like it when I understand it. I like it when I'm able to, to show that I understand the concept I'm learning.
Yeah, math, you always got to show how you got the answer.
Show how you got the work.
Yeah.
Why? Not because there's a lack of belief in your and you being able to do the work, but because you have to show the process and how you get there. So when somebody else is asking you for help, you're not, okay, well, this is how I got there. You can get here too, but let me show you how to do it. Mind you, there's a million ways. There's not one way that God can save somebody. There's a million ways that are unfathomable to the human mind. But showing how you got there is the steps and how to matriculate that growth. And that's one thing that I really appreciate, seeing that, okay, this person was struggling with lust. I remember when I was there. In fact, I remember times that I'm still there. But I'm seeing how me just talking to this person, explaining to them, their manhood or their womanhood or their identity and how it's not in their struggles, it's not in their temptations, it's not in the things that beset them, it's in Christ, and seeing how they can develop and grow the same way I did, just by me being willing to be vulnerable, or by somebody else showing them how they got there. It's again, it's rewarding. It goes back to that growth aspect, being an instrumental part in just influencing somebody else for change. It's why I still do what I do. It is. Yeah,
definitely. Just you were changed, watching somebody else change, and being vulnerable. I think that's a very big point, because oftentimes we have our own guards up, we have our own reasons where we don't want to let people in, but it's that very act of letting people in that gives them a space to talk about what they're going through, talk about their struggles, and it allows us to be closer, realize that we are more alike than we think. We struggle the same, and if you can overcome, I can overcome. And I think the devil, one of his best tactics is loneliness, isolation. You feel like you're the only one struggling with this, you feel like you're the only one who's going through this. But when you have somebody to be sad with, it helps because you're like, I'm not sad alone. I'm not going through this alone, or I'm not crazy for thinking these thoughts alone or feeling this type of way.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should practice, more vulnerability with each other. And it doesn't have to be, you don't got to be on stage and be like,
You don't have to, it could be anywhere.
Yeah,
You know?
just in your friend group. Because, sometimes we have our friends, but we're not necessarily vulnerable with them and having deeper, more meaningful conversations about our struggles and what we go through. So my last question for you would be, do you have a verse that helps you or encourages you, motivates you?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of verses, but one that's really stuck with me, and before I say this verse, it's just funny, because rightfully so, as you mentioned before, we have this knack of being self-preserved. Above all things, guard your heart, as the word says, and I'm a strong advocate, especially for women, guarding their hearts.
Yep.
Because we live in a society where if you're not careful, when you give it out, it could be trampled upon.
Destroyed.
With no regard. So I'm an advocate for guarding your heart. I am.
Yeah.
But I think that one thing that just prevents us from being in those vulnerable spaces is how we view our own story and our own testimony, not just for how it's benefited us, but how it could be beneficial to somebody else. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony. Without the testimony, the message gets lost. What God has done for you is not just for you.
That's true.
So, I say that to say, I think that God has equipped you, myself, whoever's watching out there, everything that they need to be successful in achieving their identity through Christ and through the purpose He's called to them for them on earth. And He's already given that. And He gave it when He promised to give us the Holy Spirit. All we have to do is ask and be intentional about that. No matter what facet it is, it could be a company, a ministry, it could be anything, a business. But my God will supply all your needs, not some, according to His riches and glory in Christ Jesus, Philippians 4:19. And I think that for that, what it means for me is even the things that I don't know yet in the present time that I need, He's supplied for. He's given me the provision in advance of the placement that He is molding me and cultivating me to be prepared to walk into. All I got to do is step in that thing confidently. You know what I'm saying? And let myself experience the grace of being led and my steps being ordered by His word through Christ. That's my favorite verse because that provision, that supplying aspect doesn't just benefit me. It could be generational. In fact, I believe that prayers don't expire either. Prayers that your mama or your grandmother or anybody else prayed over your life are still active. They don't expire, which means that how you move doesn't just affect you. And I believe that verse, it just gives me so much joy because I don't have to worry about anything, And although, yes, we live in a world where there is lack. God says that the poor will always be here, but I won't always be here. He said the poor will always exist. Things will always happen that will try to oppress, will try and, just get us back to a place where we don't see the light, which is again why tied back to they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony. It's not always a monetary benefit, but it could be something that just gets you in the right mindset to be willing to do better and now show somebody else how they can do that too. So that's not one of my favorite verses for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of them, but that's one that stuck with me for a long time and having confidence in the provision of God.
All right. And since we're talking about prayers, what would be your prayer for all those who are watching, thinking about ministry or just in general?
Yes, my prayer would definitely be that you are not only vulnerable in the spaces that call you to be that, but that you get to a space where you are confident and willing to be led by the Spirit to prosper within ministry, within your goals, within whatever you believe God has called you to do, that He's prepared the way, that you are adequate to be fulfilling in your purpose.
All right. Well, Ohiwai, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your testimony, all the other little gems you've been dropping this evening. For all those watching, just remember that prayer is just a conversation with God. And testimony is your story that you can share with others. So this has been Prayer and Testimony, and see you next time.
All right.